Chapter 13 of Betty Baird by Hamlin Weikel. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Holly Jensen. Chapter 13. A Feast, a Trial, a New Teacher. The monotony of school routine to which the roommates had become accustomed during the fall term now, after 10 free joyous days at home, returned to them with redoubled force. Something must be done to relieve it, so they decided to give a midnight feast, always a thrilling performance. There was a great deal of make-believe about these feasts. The girls tried hard to ignore what they fully recognized, that they were not so much a break for liberty as they seemed to be. Yet they were outlets for youthful spirits, perhaps a little too repressed in the regular life of the school, and a certain number were always expected during the year and considered by the teachers things to be winked at, since ordinarily they involved no infraction of any important rule of the school. So, 2 weeks after their return, Betty sent out cabalistic invitations, illuminated in red and gold after the fashion of an old missal in the library. At the sign of the moon, at the hour of the fairy ring dance. By the exercise of their wits, they contrived to smuggle in what they fondly regarded to be abundant supplies for a fair banquet. After dinner, they were congratulating themselves upon their success, when suddenly Betty threw up her hands, gave a groan, and dropped into a chair. Lois was frightened. "Oh, dear, Betty, what is the matter? Are you sick?" Betty's look of distress was almost dissipated by the laugh in her eyes. "Oh, Lois, it's all spoiled. Who ever heard of a feast at the Pines without Charlotte Russe? And here we've entirely forgotten it." Lois looked aghast, and she too dropped into a chair. "Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. It will not be worth keeping the girls up for," she said dolefully. "Yes, and I really boasted about it to Mary and Dorothy, right before Miriam, too. She, by the way, declined to come. I'm glad of it, too." "So am I," agreed Lois heartily. "But what are we to do, Lois? What are we to do? The girls are scattered all around on different floors, and oh, I know what I'll do." And Betty straightened up and clapped her hands gleefully. "Oh, what is it?" "You know that little shop kept by that nice old woman just outside the gate? She and I are great friends, and I can get them there. I'll dress up like an old woman and get out through the kitchen. Lizzie is there, and she'll do anything for us. I'll not be afraid, for the night watchman is on the grounds, and he'll think I'm one of the servants." "I'll go with you." "No, you mustn't. There is less risk with one." "I'll watch you from our window." "Well, you may do that, though there's really nothing to fear with old John out there, and I can talk loike any old Irish lady." Electrified by the scheme, Betty went merrily to work. She knotted her hair into an untidy roll, wisps straggling out here and there. On her head was an old untrimmed hat tied under her chin by a frayed ribbon. On her feet a forlorn pair of overshoes, a faded green shawl, and long bedraggled petticoat completing an effective disguise. With a small basket on her arm she sallied forth. She crept down through the servants' hall into the dining room, through which she expected to escape in safety to the kitchen. The dining room was dark, and she started to grope her way towards the kitchen door, a long distance to make without a board creaking. She had traversed perhaps half the distance when the dining room door was suddenly flung open and revealed Miss Leet peering into the room, the light from the hall shining directly on the kitchen door. Crouching behind one of the tables, Betty hoped Miss Leet would soon leave, but the latter, swinging the door back still farther, propped it open with a chair, then began to wander up and down the hall, leaving Betty greatly puzzled to know what to do next. She saw that she could not get out by the kitchen door, so finding herself near a window, she waited until Miss Leet was at the farther end of the hall, then opened it quietly, dropped her basket to the ground, and clambered after it. She was halfway down the walk and was breathing freely again when she suddenly came upon the old watchman, whose vigilant eyes she had hoped to escape. "Och, then, where do yez be goin' this time o' night?" he inquired. "Yez wouldn't be afther interferin' with an old woman, would yez?" Betty answered in her richest brogue. "I disremember havin' seen yez afore. How long have yez been here?" "Oh, I'm just afther stayin' here a while with some old friends." Betty pushed him away as he chucked her under the chin. "Arrah, be off with your monkey tricks," she protested, as she ran off as fast as her old shoes and long dress would allow her, while she determined to elude him on her return trip. Having procured the things she needed, she trudged back to school. As old John was pacing his accustomed beat, Betty took another path, but she did not entirely escape his observation. "Looks like someone movin'," he muttered, and walked towards her. She hid behind a big tree just in time, the darkness under it aiding her. Believing that his eyes had deceived him, the watchman continued his round, turning frequently to assure himself that there was no loiterer within the sacred precincts. As soon as his back was turned, Betty darted out and reached another big tree, when John stopped and turned, listening attentively. She was breathless from excitement and fear of discovery, yet she enjoyed the chase. The old man walked in her direction, muttering to himself, until he was so close that he actually rested his hand on the tree behind which she was hiding. He peered in all directions, but did not think to look so near home for what he was seeking. Betty was in a shiver. This was certainly too close for fun. If he came around the tree, her chances for escaping were small, but to her great relief she heard him mutter, "Must have been the trees movin' I saw," and he walked toward the front of the house, while Betty made her way to the kitchen door. She hurried up the stairs, meeting no one, rushed into the room where Lois had been watching her strategic movements from the window, and threw herself on the bed to recuperate. At the fairies' hour, from 12 to 1, 8 fairies entered the room, one after the other, led by Mary Livingstone, who had on a bright blue kimono, strings of Christmas tree decorations and popcorn encircling her neck, and toy rings on her fingers. She made a dazzling picture in the candlelight. Dorothy was in black, with silver paper stars hung around her neck and sewed on her kimono. A great silver crescent moon in her hair completed the captivating costume emblematic of night. Lois wore a pink velveteen robe and a silver paper crown in her hair, giving her the air of a princess. As might be expected, Jess had a touch of the grotesque in her costume, which was a bright crimson kimono with a red peaked cap and other Mephistophelian touches. Helen and Caroline were 2 fairies with light unbraided hair, dressed alike in pink, and with pink artificial roses as girdles. Betty had brought from home for just such an occasion an old black brocade gown of her grandmother's. It had a short empire waist, half low neck and short sleeves, and a broad lace collar fastened by an old cameo pin. The hoops were small but sufficiently large to give the proper effect. Her yellow hair was piled on top of her head and surmounted by an old-fashioned tortoise-shell comb. At one end of the room hung an old red lantern, a recognized fixture of midnight feasts at the Pines. At the other end, on a small table, stood a huge stuffed black cat, their mascot. 2 pairs of tin candlesticks stood on the tablecloth which was spread on the floor. A great bowl of red roses formed the centerpiece, and 1 rose lay at each plate, their artificiality being not too glaring in the candlelight. The plates formed an odd collection, gathered from all sources. The butter was in its own special wooden tray, made resplendent by a gorgeous paper napkin decorated with wreaths of red roses. The sardines reposed in the native silver cans, the pickles in their own lovely Bohemian glass bottles. 2 large silver loving cups, in common parlance, tin buckets, with red roses tied to their handles, furnished the drinking vessels, aided by an odd tumbler or 2. Tied to each rose at the plates was a place card bearing these words, with illuminated initials. And now they throng the moonlit glade, above, below, on every side, their little minim forms arrayed in all the tricksy pomp of fairy pride. After a series of mystic incantations, insisted on by Betty as proper to such a great occasion, the feasters took their appointed places and fell to, as Jess called it, with much subdued jollity. The time passed very quickly, and the town clock boomed out 1 o'clock long before they expected it. Accompanying it came the usual Chanticleer chorus, with the comment from Caroline, "I wonder why roosters always crow just at 1 o'clock." "Because they're natural chronometers," flashed Betty, which caused a ripple of laughter impossible to stifle. "Hush, girls! Old Leedy will hear us," cautioned one. "Yes, she will be only too glad of a chance to crow over us," agreed another. As the magic power leaves at 1 o'clock, the fairies flitted to their rooms, to be surprised on the way by an ogre, Miss Leet. "Miss Payne will hear of this tomorrow," she announced grimly. "How did she happen to come up here?" the girls asked one another, for Miss Barry and Miss Smith were the teachers on that floor, and that was the question that disturbed more than one girl's rest that night. The next morning, Miss Payne called out the names of those who had been caught and told them to come to her room. Betty and Lois were not mentioned among them, as they had not been seen by Miss Leet, but nevertheless they went with the others. "I didn't ask for you two," said Miss Payne when she saw them. "Is it about last night, Miss Payne?" asked Betty, going right to the point. "It is," she answered shortly. "Lois and I came in, Miss Payne, because the feast was held in our room. I suppose that was why Miss Leet did not see us." Miss Leet had an intimation that there was to be this violation of the rules, but she did not know what room it was to be in, explained Miss Payne. The principal's estimate of the gravity of the affair was indicated by the lightness of the punishment inflicted, to memorize Gray's Elegy within the week. As they left the room, 12 angrier girls could not be found. Even Caroline Wren was stirred to deep resentment, and her usually unchanging blonde face became crimson. The bored Dorothy was excited enough to gesticulate violently, and of course Helen was following suit. Lois was pale and weak from emotion, while Mary's brown eyes flashed and her lip curled scornfully. As for Betty, well, she was haranguing the group, her hair standing on end from running her fingers through it, her cheeks flushed angrily. It would not be hard to guess the cause of the turbulence. Certainly it was not the words of the preceptress, nor the easily memorized poem. The storm centered on the absent-minded words of Miss Payne. Miss Leet had an intimation that there was to be this violation of the rules. Who, questioned they, had been mean enough to tell her? Suspicion turned to Miriam. It came out that to harm Betty she had done many underhanded things, small in themselves, but telling largely against her at this crisis. "I saw her talking with Miss Leet only yesterday," said Helen. "I saw her too," chimed in Jess, "and they stopped until I got by, though I heard Bet's name, but I didn't dream it was any sneaking business like this." "Well," said Caroline, "I have always been Miriam's friend. I cease to be so from this day. I now see some things in a very different light. Something she said to me yesterday. Begging me not to go to the feast looks mightily suspicious. I thought it was just her jealousy of Betty." "It couldn't have been anyone else," said Mary emphatically. "The question is, girls, what are we going to do about it?" demanded Betty. "She may be innocent. Let us ask her." "Ask her?" they exclaimed. "Why, a telltale will lie." "It means fair play," answered Betty. "We'll put her on trial. Who will bring her here?" she asked, as hazy memories of the trial of Warren Hastings, which she had loved to read, floated through her mind. "You be the judge, Betty," they demanded. "I am not sure I can be impartial," she protested. "Well, we'll be the jury and decide the question," said Lois. "Who is going for her?" asked Dorothy. "I'll go," volunteered Jess, and went out. In a few minutes she returned with Miriam, who seemed very sullen. Around the room sat 9 solemn girls, Judge Betty in a high-backed chair facing the door. "Did you tell Miss Leet about our feast last night?" she demanded abruptly. "What right have you to ask?" sneered Miriam. "We want to give you a chance to declare your innocence. We have good reasons for suspecting you. If you are innocent, say so, and then we will go about finding the guilty sneak." The last word was hardly worthy of a judge, but her indignation grew as she spoke. "I refuse to answer," said Miriam stubbornly. "You ask her, Dorothy. Perhaps she'll answer you." "I don't care to have her speak to me," said Dorothy scornfully, and walked out of the room. Miriam tossed her head. "Let's not say anything more about it," said Betty, and Miriam left the room. "For pity's sake, what made you shut up that way?" demanded Jess. "Oh, I thought she had enough after Dorothy said that. Then, too, I suddenly had a feeling that Leet wormed it out of her. I don't believe even Miriam would deliberately tell on her best friend just to spite me." Betty spoke in italics and made some impression in Miriam's favor. "Well," said Mary, "that may be as you say, but why didn't she warn us when she found out old Leety knew about it? She evidently tried to warn Caroline." "Yes, she did," said Caroline reluctantly, evidently disliking her position as the best friend of the most unpopular girl in the school. "Well, I certainly don't like Miriam, but I despise that Miss Leet. She's a snake in the grass. I wish we could get her out of the school," said Betty. "How could we manage it?" asked Lois. "Tell Miss Payne about this Miriam affair. She hates underhanded methods," said Jess. "I don't like telling," said Betty. "We might all fail regularly in our history when she has the class. We can't do it in algebra because I fail anyhow. Perhaps she will understand and will be only too willing to leave the Pines." "Good scheme! I am not in your class, so I can't add to her sufferings," said Mary regretfully. "Most of us are, and we'll all say, 'I am unprepared,' day after day until she reports it to Miss Payne. Then, when she asks us about it, we'll tell her we can't recite to such a person," explained Betty. "I can't see the difference between that and going to Miss Payne at once," said the practical bell hunter. Betty looked at her pityingly. "We show Leet in the plainest way that we do not respect her, and force her to tell on herself by telling on us, for she will know the real reason, you may be sure." "Well, I can't see any great difference yet, but I am willing," said Belle. The next history class was exciting. Jess was called on first, and in a clear tone responded, "Not prepared." Miss Leet looked at her, saying, "Wait after class hour." Then she called on Lois, who also responded, "Not prepared." Miss Leet, showing some surprise, told her too to remain. Caroline also joined in the refrain, "Not prepared," and was greeted with, "I am not surprised, but you too may remain after class. Now, Miriam," she went on sweetly. As the latter recited, every girl looked coldly away. She had taken her accustomed seat next to Caroline, who steadily refused to notice her. Then came Dorothy, who was also unprepared. "She looks as if she smells a rat," whispered Jess to Betty, who in reply quoted softly and compassionately as she looked at Miss Leet. "In all the endless road you tread, there's nothing but the night, and unprepared." "Elizabeth Baird," called Miss Leet sharply as the whisper fell on her ears. Betty turned her head slowly and looked at her with cool, imperturbable eyes. "What were you saying?" "Only a line of poetry." "Repeat it." "In all the endless road you tread, there's nothing but the night, and unprepared." "Leave the room," commanded the angry teacher, and after a few more unprepareds, she dismissed the class. This continued for a week, and Miss Leet, unable to stand the strain, told Miss Payne, giving as the probable reason for their conduct, her report of the feast. She named Betty as the ringleader. The history class was called to Miss Payne's room. "Young ladies, I have been told by Miss Leet that since she faithfully reported your breaking of the rules, you have refused to recite in her history class. What is the explanation of this insubordination?" She looked severely at Betty, who trembled, but managed to answer in a firm voice, "We do not care to recite to Miss Leet." "I do not catch your meaning," and Miss Payne's voice showed amazement and displeasure. "It is this way, Miss Payne. Miss Leet has been going around listening at our doors. We know that because we caught her at it. No girl in the school would deliberately have told her about our feast, and we are sure she wormed it out of one of them. If we had been fairly caught by one of the teachers on that floor, we wouldn't have cared a bit. But to have Miss Leet go at it in such an underhanded way was more than we could stand, and we decided we would not recite any more history to her." Miss Payne studied the girls' faces thoughtfully for a while. Then she said, "I shall inquire into this and see you again if necessary. You are dismissed." Miss Leet secured another position and soon left the Pines, to the great rejoicing of the pupils. The next morning, Betty said to Lois, "I am going to tell Miss Payne this morning about going out for those things the other night. I shouldn't have done that. You know we are strictly forbidden to go outside of the gate without permission. I don't know why I didn't think of it that way before, but I suppose it was this excitement about Miss Leet. I wonder what Miss Payne will do to me. Oh dear, I hope she won't send me away from school. What would Mother think?" "Send you away from school for a little thing like that?" "It wasn't a little thing, Lois. The feast itself wasn't so bad, but to dress up like that and go outside of the gate was, and you know it. I am going down right now and tell her and have it off my mind." "I am going with you." "What for?" asked Betty in surprise. "Because I was in it as much as you were. The only reason I didn't go with you is because you wouldn't let me." "Well, you are not going now." "I am, and you can't keep me from it this time," and she went. Miss Payne heard the story, contritely told, and looked very grave indeed. "I am exceedingly sorry to hear this, Elizabeth. You know how strict our rule is about going outside the grounds, and to think of your going out that way at night! I fear I shall have to punish you severely. I must ask you not to go out with the other pupils on Saturday afternoons for the rest of the term. And you," she added, turning to Lois, "must not go out for a month." And with some kind words, she dismissed the two humbled girls. The teacher who took Miss Leet's place was Miss Spice. To the roommates, her name was suggestive of pleasant home cheer. A wholesome, practical, intellectual woman, of sterling character, with the saving graces of humor and sympathy. The pupils at once dubbed her Spice Cake. A few days after her arrival, Miss Greene invited her to her room, and over a friendly cup of tea they fell to discussing the pupils whom Miss Spice was eager to understand in order to do effective work. Betty, always interesting to Miss Greene, occupied a large part of their conversation. "You will find her decidedly deficient in mathematics. Miss Leet's antagonism increased her natural distaste. We are all anxious to have her improve, for it is the only branch in which she is behind her class. If you can win her regard, she will work hard to please you, for she is a conscientious student as well as a devoted friend," Miss Greene explained. "Her bright face attracted me," replied Miss Spice, "and I wondered at her failure in the class. I shall be doubly interested in her now. I judge she is a born leader." "She seems to care very little for managing people or affairs, but she is fond of the picturesque and poetic. Her chief power lies in doing things in a way different from the humdrum, and the girls like it. Then, too, she enters heart and soul into everything she undertakes and inspires others. There is no gray in her color scheme. She deals in the primaries." "I shall enjoy seeing what I can do for her," said Miss Spice enthusiastically. Then the conversation drifted to other topics. In algebra, Miss Spice found Betty attentive but puzzled. Her talk with Miss Greene had shown her the trouble, and she soon settled on a remedy. Having won Betty's confidence, she drilled her thoroughly, not only in class, but often during the study hour in her own room, reviewing the lessons with her from the beginning. Betty worked hard, devoting every spare moment to the detested study, with the result that she passed an examination with credit to both teacher and pupil. The last week of the school year, Betty and Lois spent together in the shadowy old park, where arm in arm they loitered through the shady paths, reading and dreaming and loving the great, beautiful summer world. To the young girls this was an enchanted place, and ever, as they walked there, they carried with them the little red and gold morocco volume, which expressed the things they loved most to talk about. The Idylls of the King spoke to them of castles and tournaments, of bold knights and glorious chivalry, while the very atmosphere seemed to hold the promise of something impending. For hours they wandered in the quaint old garden, tucked away in a corner of the great park, where the weather-beaten sundial, in the midst of the boxwood and old-time flowers, greeted them with the gracious assurance which symphonized well with their own feelings. I chronicle only the sunny hours. Tears ran down the cheeks of the girls as they read the parting words of the stricken Arthur to his few faithful retainers. The sequel of today unsolders all, the goodliest fellowship of famous knights, whereof this world holds record. Such a sleep they sleep, the men I loved. I think that we shall never more, at any future time, delight our souls with talk of knightly deeds, walking about the gardens and the halls of Camelot, as in the days that were. "I can't bear it, it's so sad and sweet," said Lois, as the silent tears fell unheeded. "This seems like Camelot," said Betty dreamily, after a long silence. "It was a barren stretch of land. On the one side was the ocean, and on the other a great water, and the moon was full." So earnest were they that they missed the humor of comparing this beautiful park with that barren strip of sand. It was in those balmy days, as the friends walked through the dim paths, that the dream came to Betty of founding a knightly order for good and gentle deeds. With shining eyes she spoke to Lois of the growing impulse. "Oh, we must revive the spirit of chivalry, Lois. It is too beautiful to pass away forever. I, for one, believe in knighthood." End of chapter 13. Recording by Holly Jensen.